All right, so thank you very much for your questions. I hope you had a fruitful discussion at your tables. I've been reading over some of these questions and seeing if some of them fit together, and some of them do. So there's actually a group of three that are very similar in nature, so I'll try to answer them at the same time. Obviously, I'm not intending to give the most thorough answer possible to these, right? But just to give you some basic orientations. So the three questions I'm going to answer together. Number one, how do you recommend approaching family members who are strongly resistant and angry about others demonstrating and practicing the faith? Okay. Number two, how do we respond when we encounter people who don't do organized religion? And number three, how assertive should one be when sharing Jesus or faith with others? So I find it helpful to be aware of some of the research that's been done into conversion among postmoderns, specifically the millennials. You don't evangelize people now the way you may have evangelized them 50 years ago, right? Because there's a lot of resistance, there's a lot more skepticism, there's a lot more anger, all that kind of thing. So relativism has really made great inroads. So part of the fruit of that research is the idea that there are 5 thresholds of conversion among postmodern people. So I'm not going to explain them all in great detail, but trust is the first threshold. Then curiosity, openness, seeking, and finally the step of intentional discipleship. So, in other words, even though we may want to bring people to intentional discipleship, most of the time you need to start with the first threshold, which is just trust. So if you have someone who's extremely angry and belligerent and doesn't want to hear anything about religion and thinks that religion is offensive, and even the mention of it is going to be unacceptable, intolerable, even though they may be preaching tolerance about a whole bunch of other things, you need to work on the trust. Right? So, and we're not just talking about them trusting you as an authority on matters of truth. We're just talking about basic human trust. So showing that you are a trustworthy human being, that you are somebody who has a genuine, sincere interest in them, in their lives, and in their family, in their hobbies, in their occupation, and you build trust the way you build it in any human relationship, in any friendship, in any family relationship, right? So that's where you need to begin, right? And many times, once the trust is there, the personal trust, all of a sudden, a lot of these intellectual barriers will start to fall. And when you say something, all of a sudden, even though you're saying exactly the same thing that the preacher is saying in church and the Pope is saying or whatever, all of a sudden, because you're saying it, all of a sudden it's credible to them. Because you are a trustworthy person. And then the next stage is curiosity. So if you have that basic trust relationship with someone, you can start to work on awakening their curiosity, to live curiously. Remember what we were saying earlier about how a Christian is not of the world. So you're not being of the world. That distinctiveness about you is what can irritate people, but it can also awaken curiosity. If you just allow it to do its job, right? So the witness of your life, the witness of your courage in the face of adversity, the fact that you are honest when there's so much pressure to be dishonest, right? That you care for the person. And all these marks of the Christian faith. Historically, historians have looked at why did Christianity succeed in the Roman Empire, right? Which was so hostile, just as hostile as our society is today. And a lot has to do not with ideas. It's not because we had the most persuasive ideas and the most brilliant minds, although we had lots of brilliant minds. But it's just the witness that of Christians loving one another, loving the poor, loving the weak, loving the vulnerable in a society that was extremely brutal and hierarchical, right? Roman society was all about the strong trampling on the weak. That's what it was all about. And Christians didn't do that. Christians lived differently, and it's because they lived differently that people were drawn to them like a magnet. Okay, and then of course, openness to change, that's the hardest one for millennials and for postmodern people in general. To think that I have to change my life, that's the hardest one. So I'm not going to talk about all of them, but that's those are some ways to begin when you're dealing with people who are very hostile. Obviously, being sarcastic, mocking their beliefs, never a good idea, right? Pointing out how contradictory relativism is, not a good place to start. But if you do establish the trust, you can start to gently, gently show to them that relativism contradicts itself, right? That if nothing is true, then even what I just said isn't true, right? And if my truth is as good as your truth, then why bother about the truth at all, And imagine someone going to a doctor and saying, "Who are you to impose your perception of the human body upon me?" It's like, okay, I won't impose anything. You're going to die, So, okay. How can you give some practical advice on how to integrate faith into our temporal lives? We are used to compartmentalizing. Very good point. Yes. When you look at the journey toward spiritual maturity or spiritual wholeness, the journey toward human happiness and human fulfillment and actualization is very similar, right? So the road to wholeness and the road to holiness both involve moving from fragmentation into unity. So in other words, taking down the compartments, right? Taking down the bulkheads. Not being one person here and another person in my job and another person with my spouse and another person when I'm playing video games, or behind the wheel of a car or whatever. That I become unified, right? That's the journey towards spiritual wholeness and human wholeness. Okay. You said keep it practical. Okay. So if you're having trouble finding God in the mundane and the ordinary events, well, be intentional about it. So one of the fundamental spiritual practices is the idea of a consciousness examen, or an examination of conscience at the end of your day, to review, to deliberately pray through everything that happened. Not just the holy times, not just when you were doing religious things, but you pray through every moment of your day and you look for God. You make a point. And you ask the Holy Spirit to show you, where were you in that situation that apparently has nothing to do with God at all. Because we believe that God is in everything, in fact. It's just that we don't see it. We're the ones who put God in a box. We're the ones who put God in compartments. We're the ones who say God can only be, in the church, or when I'm reading the Bible, or when I'm praying, and he's not when I'm playing sports, or he's not when I'm doing business. He's not in that. Of course he is. He's in everything, right? But I have to have my eyes open to see that. Okay. And just like I'd invite you to pray over the most mundane aspects of your life, pray over secular events, because there are no such things, really, as secular events. The events that we read about in the newspaper, right? Things that are going on in the world. Pray about them. They're not just the result of social forces, cultural forces, political forces. There's spiritual forces at work in those events too. Again, we have to have the eyes to see them as people of faith. That's just to get you started. Okay. Did any mutation arise as a result of a misinterpretation of Vatican II? Yes, and I'm glad you asked. Because, that decree on the apostolate of the laity was trying to correct an unfortunate tendency toward clericalism, right? Toward an accentuation of the importance of the clergy in the church to the exclusion of the laity. To put clergy on such a pedestal that they are some kind of super Christian. They're like a higher category of Christian. And but in trying to reverse the damage of clericalism, of the undue exaltation of the ordained, in the decades that immediately followed the council, the quick fix, the quick solution, in many cases was, well, let's just get more lay people involved in the running of the church, in the liturgy, in liturgical ministries. Let's employ more lay people. Let's get more lay people involved in decision making, and that's going to fix the problem. What happened, though, is that you ended up creating a whole new clerical class above the rest of the congregation, those who are involved in ministry. So it's a phenomenon called the clericalization of the laity, right? So you create a whole new elite, and it's just the mirror image of the clericalism you were trying to defeat, right? You've now succeeded in creating a new class of people who lord it over everybody else in the parish, right? That's not going to solve the problem, right? You're just perpetuating it. So that's not obviously what Vatican II had in mind, right? So when it says that the proper and distinctive vocation of the laity is to transform and renew the temporal order, that shows you that they weren't thinking of having 52 Eucharistic ministers on the altar, or having 300 people involved as lectors, or having everybody grabbing a guitar, right? That's not what the council had in mind when they were talking about the vocation of the laity. The primary vocation is out there, right? And yes, it is good to have lay people involved in liturgical ministries, but it's out there, transforming the temporal order, transforming your families, transforming your workplace, transforming the world of business, entertainment, sports, all the things that we mentioned. Okay. Are there degrees of faith? So, yes, it's not something that you can break down into like 6 or 7 levels or something like that. But faith can grow, absolutely. So faith is both a gift of God and a human act at the same time. So it's a truly free human act, right? So I am freely choosing to believe, but it's also God's gift. That's the paradox. It's both together. As a gift from God, faith, hope, and love are given to me along with God's grace, sanctifying grace in baptism. And then every time I receive the other sacraments, especially the Eucharist, the grace of God grows in me, assuming I'm receiving with the proper dispositions. And those 3 virtues, the theological virtues, faith, hope, and love, also grow. So in terms of the gift of God, receiving the gift of God, it's through the fruitful reception of the sacraments that I need to seek to grow in faith from that angle. But faith is also a human act. It's also a virtue that I need to cultivate, right? So when we think about a virtue, think about a muscle. How does a muscle grow? It grows by being used, right? So if you don't use it, you lose it, right? And it's the same with every virtue. You have to actually practice the faith. You have to put it into practice. You have to make acts of faith. And just like with building muscle mass, it works with resistance, right? When faith is resisted, when it has to work against a resistance, that's when it gets stronger. So when you're facing something that challenges your faith and you come against it, either your own doubt or someone else's doubt, or a trial in your life or suffering in your life, and you deliberately make a point of exercising faith in those situations. Like, Lord, I don't know where you are, but I'm going to trust you. I trust you in the darkness. I trust you through this illness. I trust you through this bad financial mess that I'm in right now. So exercising the faith will make it stronger. So, yes, faith does have degrees, and it is supposed to grow. Why do evangelicals or charismatic Protestants appear more outgoing and evangelize better? Okay. Well, that would take a lot of discussion. But I could say it's because it's part of their culture, right? So in other words, it's not just because they have more of the Holy Spirit or because they have better preachers, although they often do, or because they're better Christians. It's not that. It's that they have a culture, and that's something that we can build, and that's what we're all about, right? With rerouting and every other, all the directions in which this parish is moving, is we're trying to build a culture of being missionary disciples. Right? It's not something you can just decide to do on your own. It's not. You don't flip a switch and all of a sudden everybody's a missionary disciple. Right? You have to build it as a culture. You have to. It has to do with what you encourage, what you promote, what you reward in the parish. Right? So if you want people to be evangelizing, well then reward. But you know what I'm saying when I say reward. I don't mean like give them, give them favors or whatever. I mean, like, but put them on display. Say, look, this is a successful example of a missionary disciple. Here's a testimony, right? Here's a normal parishioner who went out and proclaimed the gospel, and look at the wonderful fruit that happened, right? You put it on display, you reward it, you encourage it. The people who are good at it, you promote them, right? It's like in any business. Right? Those of you who are business people, you know how this works. You change a culture by what you promote and also what you tolerate or don't tolerate, right? And if there's behavior that goes counter to that, you need to put an end to it, right? So that's why I think the evangelical and charismatic Protestants seem to have an edge, is because they've built that, right? From the top down. It has to be at all levels of the organization. Can you be an apostle in your own home? Absolutely, right? So I'm assuming, you're living with other people. So, I mean, maybe you're a hermit. I mean, but even if you're a hermit, even if you live by yourself, you can still be an apostle, right? You can be an apostle by exercising the gift of intercession, right? Which is a very important gift, or the gift of hospitality, right? Or simply by your manner of life. I mean, we know that evangelization eventually has to come out in words. It's not enough to just live as a stealth Christian, right? You do have to proclaim Jesus, but it begins with the witness of your life, that you are living according to the gospel in a way that others can see. Like Jesus said, you don't light a lamp to put it under the bushel basket. It's meant to be seen by everyone in the house. But if you all have other people living with you, there's all kinds of opportunities to share the good news of Jesus. We all need to hear the gospel of Jesus proclaimed. I need to hear the gospel of Jesus proclaimed. I need to be evangelized, right? Sometimes I need to evangelize myself. Sometimes listening to my homilies, I'm evangelizing myself. I mean, I know that sounds really crazy, but it's like, it's not just about giving; it's also about receiving. So, yes, there's so many ways in which you can share the faith, the love, the joy of Jesus in your home, right? To make Jesus the center of your home, just like to be a disciple is to make him the center of your life. Well, make him the center of your home. Make it evident. Make it so evident that there's nobody who could step in the door without realizing that Jesus is the center and Lord of this home, right? Create a culture. We're talking about culture as a parish. Create a culture of domestic life that rewards godliness, right? That encourages it, that promotes it, and that deals with the opposite, right? So all of these are ways of sharing the good news. The simplest way of expressing what it means to share the good news is to tell someone why Jesus is the best thing that ever happened to you. Right? It's as simple as that. Right? And we can do that anywhere with anyone. So thank you.